In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Nathan Lutz, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Dustin Melbardis. How are you doing, Dustin?
I'm great. It's a windy day here in Texas, but I am happy to be inside, safe, away from the rain, away from the storm, and talking about a great movie.
Kind of the opposite here in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area, actually out in Johnstown today. Very cold winter day, but absolutely no wind, so it's that perfect winter stillness. And for scary movies like today's discussion, I've got a puppy sleeping on my foot for maximum comfort. So we are all good.
The cold is tolerable when you have puppy space heater.
Exactly.
Who is that talking?
Funny you should ask. JD, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm JD Donnelly, previously guest hosted on the Fargo episode, but this is much more my pool of knowledge when you bring up creatures and monsters and animals of all kinds. I'm creature creator, artist, all that jazz, and my specialty is monsters.
So, an absolute expert for this movie discussion, and the choice of this movie, of course, was yours, because this just fits you so well.
Yeah, I finally remember this movie, seeing it as a child. Yes, I did see this as a child. And it's like a more obscure movie, like not many people remember it. So like every time I'm like, oh, what's a movie no one talks about? Like Deep Rising. It's a fun movie, and has some really cool practical effects and creature designs going on. So it was interesting to revisit it at an older age in hindsight, too.
Yeah, and for Dustin and I, this is also a fitting movie because last year we reviewed another movie involving large boats that could be described as cruise ships under certain circumstances that you may have heard of. Probably not, but you may have heard of it, called Titanic. And that's the movie that sank this movie, because this movie was released 1 month after Titanic, which is just not the time that you want to release other movies.
That's right, audience. You've got your big boat boys right here. When it comes to any other ocean liner movies, when it comes to cruise ships, hey, I'm down to do a speedboat movie. You just make sure Nathan and I are on the episode, and you guys are taken care of.
Now I'm just picturing, because if they were in theaters at the same time, having, like, sweet old lady who might not know all the details, like, go up, like, excuse me, can you give me a ticket to the boat movie? And then they get a ticket to, like, Deep Rising when they thought they were going to Titanic.
Right. How much time do you have? Oh, you've got dinner plans? Deep Rising.
So
the monster was from the iceberg. It was frozen in there. And Titanic awoke it when it cracked it open.
That sounds like a great creature design.
How awesome would it be if the ship that the monster from this movie was swimming around in the POV shot at the beginning that opens the movie was actually like the Titanic itself?
Well, that's in the Atlantic Ocean.
It's in the wrong ocean,
but ironically, there actually is a children's book franchise that was adapted into an anime at one point called Serendipity, which is about a friendly pink sea monster who hatches from an egg that was frozen in an iceberg.
So,
hey, we've stumbled onto something great here.
All right, well, we've talked around it quite a lot, but Dustin, what is the movie that we are watching today?
Oh, we already said it. It is Deep Rising from 1998.
All right, this is a movie starring Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, Anthony Head, Kevin J. O'Connor, Wes Studi, Derrick O'Connor, and Jason Flemyng. It was released in 1998, grossing $11 million, just a little north of that, which is, for its budget, a serious loss. It placed 125th in the box office, so woof. The movie ahead of it was at number 124 was Mr. Magoo, and at 126 was The Full Monty, which is a stage play I've seen. Number one movie that year was Titanic. IMDb rating was 6.1. Rotten Tomatoes scores it at 30% for the critics and just a little bit better for the audience score at 43%. So not a movie that was reviewed well on when it first came out, and definitely was not winning any awards, except that Roger Ebert happened to include the film on his most hated list, since he thought it was totally derivative of a whole bunch of other films, especially as a clone of Alien with French paint job. So this is a movie that got a lot of derision when it came out.
Yeah, but I mean, I was just watching a clip last night. Tremors was the same way. Tremors was a box office bomb, and now it's revived via cult classic just because of VHS rentals, which this is a movie I did not see in theaters as a child, definitely, but I did remember fondly watching it with my dad on TV. So I think it's gained like fresh life on streaming services, and like people watch, like I know it was on HBO Max for a while, so people just finding it in the annals.
Yes, well, so I know, JD, you've definitely seen this movie before, but coming back to it this time, what were you expecting and what did you find out?
Honestly, the most nostalgic aspects of it for me are the monsters and the creature design, because I was the weird little kid that rooted for the dinosaurs, sharks, monsters to eat the people, because usually there's like a methodology to these kind of movies where it's jerks that get their comeuppance in some way at the teeth of nature, so to speak. So, looking back at it now, like, now that I'm older and wiser and, you know, an English major and a writer now and actually understand the mechanics of writing a good story, some parts fell flatter than what I remember. But honestly, is it a good movie? Objectively, maybe not. But is it a fun movie? Yes.
And hey, this monster got to eat quite a lot of people before it went out.
Yep. Also, lots of really good use, like gold, like the era when the CGI was in its infancy, so they were still relying on a lot of practical effects for stuff, which is what I greatly appreciate.
You trying to say that thing wasn't real?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any currently living vertebrates or invertebrates that have multiple mouths. Like, I don't think there's any that have multiple feeding orifices, even in the sea.
Come on, octopuses. You have to get there eventually.
Octopodes.
Octopodes.
Technically, octopodes is the correct plural.
Oh.
It's not octopi, it's octopode.
And here I thought it was just a debate between octopi and octopuses.
Nope, technically it's octopode.
Octopodes. All right. Well, Dustin, how about you? Had you seen this movie before?
No way. Never had I seen this movie. I definitely went to theater to see Titanic, but we were briefly mentioning how this was maybe overlooked. Even when I got the text about seeing this movie, I was seconds away from streaming Deep Impact. Because while the name of the movie was maybe I kind of remembered it, I had no clue what I was getting into, which is my favorite feeling when it comes to a new movie, is really not knowing what's going to happen. So I watched it for the first time right around Christmas, New Year's Eve, and then I watched it again last night. But yeah, it was new to me. So that's one of the best things about this podcast.
Yeah, likewise, this is a new one for me. I had actually a different movie with deep in the title that was Deep Star 6, which is another underwater monster movie that
and there's Deep Blue Sea, and
which one of them have cruise ships in them? Because we'll do that next year.
Have you guys done a Poseidon Adventure yet?
Oh my gosh, we need to do Poseidon Adventure. That's the movie that starts out with a giant wave hitting...
That's the one where the cruise ship ends up upside down.
Okay.
Funny fact, when I was looking up info about this movie, apparently Deep Rising is the American title, and internationally it's Octolus.
That's so much better. Octolus.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I
would like
Octolus
that. Prime.
All right, well.
Well, it would better than the working title, which I believe was Tentacle.
Yeah, that can open up the doors to a totally different genre.
An audience that is sharing the same theater with you, but having a very different reaction. All right, well, I believe that it is time. We are going to come back after an advertisement break and spoil this movie for you. So if you, our wonderful audience members, have not seen this movie before, go watch it and come back right after these messages for a discussion of the plot by Dustin.
Welcome to the Flashback Flicks Retro Movie Podcast. I'm Ricky.
I'm Grayson.
And every week we review a movie from the past and reflect on things we missed, things we loved, and things we want to see again.
Yeah, because we believe any movie worth watching is worth watching again.
So if you like films, friendship, and a lot of callbacks,
I mean, just so many callbacks,
then subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever RSS feeds go for like-minded movie-loving individuals. Like you.
What happens when two modern film fans go back and rewatch all the old classic films from yesteryear to see if they hold up? You get the Classic Film Jerks podcast. Find the Classic Film Jerks podcast on all the major platforms.
Welcome back, everyone, and hopefully you've watched the movie because Dustin is about to totally spoil it for you. Dustin, take it away.
The Argonautica, the most luxurious cruise ship built to lavish expectations and catering to only the richest pleasure seekers in the world. On board, Trillian St. James is slinking about looking for easy marks, suffering through the welcome speech of the ship's owner and the host of the party, Simon Canton. Meanwhile, Finnegan, Joey, and Layla are blasting through choppy waters on their way to an unknown destination, carrying their clients, a literal Street Fighter international cadre of mercenaries, to their unknown destination. Hey, if the cash is there, we do not care. What a life philosophy. Before these two boats can rendezvous, a third actor emerges from the deep, rising toward the ship at breakneck speeds. An all-out assault from an unseen danger eliminates most of the life on board. When the mercenaries, led by culturally ambiguous Hanover, take over Finnegan's boat to stage a hijack, they are surprised to see that there's no one to intimidate and no clues as to what has happened, aside from a lot of blood. After merging with the remaining survivors, we encounter the tentacle beast, which begins to methodically pick off the remaining members of the crew. The game is survival and they are severely outmatched. The only option remaining is possible extraction from the nearest island, which is accessible only from the jet skis on board the cruise ship. Last-second twist as Canton attempts to kill any witnesses to the events of the night, to escape and collect his insurance money for the loss of his investment. A cluster luck of chain reaction explosions destroy the beast and any remains of the Argonautica, while Trillian, Finnegan, and thank God, Joey find their way to the island where they are welcomed by the roar of something sinister. Now what?
That is a great synopsis, Dustin. Thank you.
Yeah, I put some effort into that one.
Good job. Two tentacles.
All right. Well, one thing that this movie brings up is when you have a good monster mystery or just monster horror movie, what makes it a good one? This is a movie that was really poorly reviewed at the time, and now it's like a really fun, large budget B movie to go back to. But what for you in a movie that has a plot this complicated works and doesn't work with that trope?
I liked, particularly looking back now and watching it while I'm older, how it starts off, like it almost genre hops, like, cause it starts off, you think, oh, it's gonna be a heist movie. And then suddenly there's a, third party coming in and it's the monster. And suddenly it turns, you have enemies becoming, tenuous allies and all that jazz. So like, it's almost like another good analogy would be Predator, where Predator was set up, do you think it's a military movie? And then halfway through it becomes a sci-fi horror. So this is kind of like the same, like, oh, we think it's going to be a heist movie, and then it turns into a survival horror. And also for me, you're MVP, like the focus of the movie, you pay to see the monster. Whether it be a graboid or an octolus or an alien or
Xenomorph, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like what you said there about comparing it to a Predator, is that you think the movie's something, and it moves to something else. Because the idea of it being a heist, or that we're following this pickpocket / criminal, wanted in 4 countries, Trillian St. James, played by Famke Janssen, that stops mattering really quickly.
Yeah.
The plot about intentionally sinking the ship for the insurance collection and requiring the assistance of these mercenaries to sink the ship, and we can't know what's happening. All the guests would be safe on the lifeboats. That would be maybe a little too much to wrap up. So how about we have something wreck all of it, which is this monster. And I also like what you said. Is like that's what we're here for. We want to see what it is. What
I was
this
discussing
could be.
with Nathan, like because in my brain, Deep Rising is more of an action with horror flavoring than a straight up horror movie. But like, if you were to theoretically only stick to the cast that's on the cast of the mercenaries, Finnegan, Joey, and Layla, like if you stuck with only their POV from the beginning of the film to when they get to the boat, and you think like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a heist, it's a hijacking movie, and then you get on like, wait, where is everybody? And then, but like basically omit all like the foreshadowing, like the scenes with Trillian and like seeing like the saboteur messing up the ship, which turns out to be Canton, and the beast initially attacking the ship, because that's all shown like through cut back and forth between the two groups until they meet up on the boat itself. Like if you stuck with just the borders, so to speak, using the pirate terminology, it would almost be straight up horror, because then you could almost end up with like a flavoring of The Thing, which, by the way, the beast was designed by Bakken, who did design the creature in The Thing, the 80s thing, not the 50s one. Because then you'd have, like, this group trying to figure out what the heck happened, and then you encounter survivors, and you'd be like, one of them being a thief, so it's like, okay, well, who's telling the truth of, like, this person said this happened, this, like, at first they actually think there's multiple monsters, and then you find out at the tail end of the film that it's all one singular beast with multiple tentacles and mouths, but, so it honestly would take very little editing to fully shift it into straight up horror. And like I said, more like flavoring like of The Thing, where you have like the human paranoia brought into it.
I'm glad you mentioned the thing that I was gonna tack on at the end of that, which was they don't know what it is, because, or I guess we should say, they don't know what they are, because through most of the movie, they are believing it's several things. It is an infestation, which makes sense from their point of view.
Especially for the tentacle designs, because they drew a lot of inspiration from bobbit worms, which... one of the few animals that legitimately skeeve me out. They are a undersea invertebrate. They can get up to, I think, 18 or 20 feet long, and they kind of like sarlaccs from Star Wars, where they live in burrows in coral and underground, and they just have their mouths poking out, and they like grab nearby fish. But like, as we see, like the mouths of the octolus has like multiple jaws that unfurl, almost in a very Demogorgon-esque manner. Bobbit worms legit have functioning jaws like that. Can like basically slice fish in half. If you get bit by one, you can suffer permanent paralysis in the area you are bitten.
It has scissor-like jaws, and it's called the bobbit worm. Who was the biologist who named it? Because I think they were taking a little inspiration from some late 90s media.
They're very, very old. Like, I'm pretty sure they were named long ago. And then the main body of the octolus creature itself definitely draws inspiration from cephalopods like squids, and particularly the Vampirus toothus, the vampire squid from hell. That's legit the scientific translation of that name. Especially since instead of having suckers on its tentacles, it has spikes. Because the vampire squid, it's its own distinct member of the squid family. So they too, instead of having suckers on their tentacles, they have.
Yeah. So definitely, this is a movie that really gets its monster right and introduces that in with a whole bunch of other plots, which are, in and of themselves, they're interesting, but the monster totally outshines them all. And to some extent, that makes me wonder how you think that the casting decisions for this movie work with that, because all the casting decisions feel like an action movie kind of thing. Yeah. All the mercenaries are very, this feels very Die Hard for a long time. Yeah.
They're bros.
They're all bros.
They are bros. That's very fun for me.
Yes. There aren't the salty sailors who are knowledgeable about the sea.
The leading man, Finnegan, the everyday action hero star.
Yep.
They did try to get Harrison Ford into that role, and he turned it down. So they substituted Treat Williams.
Not a bad substitute here.
He's good.
I feel as if how did I want to say this? If Indiana Jones and Han Solo needed a representative from Earth to be a part of their Scoundrels Club, then John Finnegan would fit the bill. He's not wearing a vest, but he's got the classic,
he has a flannel.
Tie the flannel around your waist. I love it.
Yeah, and honestly, until I rewatched it recently, I thought it was Bill Paxton. Sorry, Treat Williams.
I gotta say, Russell, Treat Williams dresses a lot like Russell does. With that, that's how I've seen him a lot with the flannel around his waist, tied around. It's very funny to watch. Russell Guest, action hero on the Argonautica.
Well, and John Finnegan and his crew, they are boat people, sailing people. But we learn that the mercenaries are not. Now, we don't know much about what they do, but apparently working on the water isn't their number one thing. This is revealed to us through T-Ray, the Australian representative of the international crew, that I don't like this water stuff. It's the reason why, and I feel like this has to be done in this way. Stephen Sommers, or whoever it is that set this up, they do a really painstakingly over the top job of not including too many plot holes. They're trying to give you an explanation for everything. Because if they were sailors or if they were pirates, they're not pirates, then they wouldn't need to get Finnegan and his crew involved at all. They would likely just kill them and take their boat.
Or rent a boat.
So they need them for this reason. Because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get to their destination.
Yeah.
We can't say that they safely navigated there. They ran over a speedboat.
We killed a speedboat, guys.
Yeah, that's right. So there's little stuff on the way that, in order to get here, was mentally taxing for the writer to be like, how do we get all these people here at the same time?
Because they really wanted to be a mystery, and if Treat Williams as John Finnegan and his crew are just other members of the mercenary crew, they're just their usual. If they were usually their ship operators for them, then there wouldn't be any way to have it as a mystery of who hired who.
Yeah. And also, too, they're supposed to be the heroes we're rooting for. If they're mercenaries and we know their intent is to go rob a bunch of people, we're not necessarily going to root for them and, root for the monster to eat them. So you got to, keep your the hands of your hero cast somewhat clean of dirt.
Somewhat clean. Yeah.
So they were unwitting accomplices caught in the crossfire.
Which is one thing that kind of struck me as odd of this movie, which is that Simon Canton, as played by Anthony Held, the owner of the Argonautica, who has decided to go in for this insurance scam, how does he connect with this particular group of mercenaries? Because I feel like the fact that they're usually land-based implies to me a sort of alternate telling of his character, that he's actually a total landlubber.
Well, he screwed up the math.
He did screw up the math. Yeah, but I don't necessarily mean so much that his character needs to be stupid. I just mean that his character seems to be someone who's a landlubber to the point of he's built a ship that is so large that you can't tell that you're on the water anymore. He's tried to make it super luxurious, and there's almost an alternate version of this for me in which Finnegan should be the one who knows about the monster, because he's the one who knows. He's the only one in this whole group, other than his own crew, who knows something about the ocean.
Yeah.
I am actually going to touch on this a little later, but not quite yet. But I'm glad that you arrived at the same point that I did. There's other things that are just so barely connected and you don't need an explanation, but I believe Canton even says to Finnegan, I know all about you, Finnegan.
Oh, yeah.
What does he know? How do they know each other? Canton says, building this $487.6 million yacht is my life's dream? Well, that doesn't sound like a landlubber's life's dream. There's some stuff that eventually we're going to hit our wall as to what can be explained. Aside from that, they did, I'm going to say, a pretty good job of, we got there.
Yes.
All right? We got here. And now there's the scary unknown.
It was funny though you mentioned the plot holes. They did do a good job plugging a lot of plot holes in this sinking ship. I will point out one I noticed on our rewatching last night though, which is the whole main crux of acts, half of Act 2 and 3 is that after Finnegan's boat kills a speedboat, but they basically run over a speedboat that fell off the Argonautica when it was initially attacked by the monster. They have to go onto the Argonaut itself and get replacement parts to fix their engine. And so the whole second half of the movie is we gotta get these parts back to our boat, because the Finnegan's boat is theoretically the only way off this
Which initially
floating.
makes sense because they want to fix their own ship. It's their own boat.
But when it gets to the point where they lose the parts after a certain point, and it looks like, oh, we're going to be trapped, and they eventually, the two survive. Petrucci makes it off via surfboard, but then Finnegan and Trillian make it off via skidoo, a jet ski. There was a whole bunch of unused lifeboats on the ship itself.
Yeah.
Why didn't they, when they realized, oh, we can't take our own boat, why not just take a lifeboat?
Yeah. But as Dustin says, we get there. We get to the ship and we get to this wonderful, awesome moment where they walk into the ballroom that we just saw this party in a couple of minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all messed up and destroyed. The lights are out. There's things sparking and there's blood everywhere.
But
and
no
they're
bodies.
Like, what the heck happened here? And that is just a great moment. And we get to the point, it's just like, this is the horror direction. From this moment on, the horror direction is just great.
Yeah, so like that's the moment it would shift from heist to something.
So,
genre.
What is sort of what are the scenes that stand out to you, Dustin, about sort of the horror that builds and works as this plot moves forward?
It's a good question. I think to start with the unknown assailant, the monster, the Octolus. This thing really makes short work of thousands of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, for the remaining 50 minutes, we have a methodical taking out of the others one at a time. There's the idea that this thing is smart enough to calculate,
to close doors,
and
to
plan ahead.
Yeah,
right. Now I don't know why the Octolus is taking its time with this group. There is an important thing that happens, and JD, you mentioned Predator. The phrase is, if it bleeds, we can kill it. They shoot some of the tentacles, and sometimes either a tentacle or a group of them recoils away very fast. Ouch, that hurts. Stop pinching me. I'm going to pull this away. So there's the idea that these absolutely ridiculous firearms that they have.
Unlimited ammo.
Yes.
1,000 ammo capacity. Those guns should weigh 70 pounds.
Yep.
Those ridiculous guns they have, so much fun, in fact, that some of the mercenaries are just shooting them because it's a blast, because they're bros.
Bros on boats.
Action movie bros with machine guns.
Bros on boats.
Yeah, I think it's T-Ray and Vivo. They shoot it, and then they stop shooting it, and then they just unload again because it's fun. But getting back to so this thing can be combated in a way. Eventually it becomes, we gotta get off this boat. We have just the right amount of claustrophobic areas where it's like we're getting choked out. It is directing us somewhere. I think the idea wouldn't be very fun if this extremely powerful creature got them all at once, which we have to believe it could, but it doesn't. It is directing them towards the hull. We don't know exactly why. That's where its kind of large bulbous head with its eyeball is, but it's not like it needs that to digest, not eat you alive, but drink you alive. As far as whatever its purpose is, if you were to go the further step, and I think, JD, you probably have some experience with this, but the idea that this creature is intelligent or curious enough to play with its food.
I mean, it could be the Octolus was, it needed some mental stimulation. Like in the zoos, you gotta give your tigers a pumpkin full of chopped meat every now and then.
Yeah.
Or it could be, for what I kind of gleaned with my background knowledge of just being a big animal nerd. In the very beginning of the film, the opening shot is aside from the text explaining that the Dragon Triangle is the Pacific version of the Bermuda Triangle and a lot of ships disappear. They show from a POV of the monster swimming underwater all these shipwrecks from across a whole bunch of eras, like ancient sailing vessels to more modern iron vessels. That it could be that one of the biggest things with predatory creatures is conservation of energy. Like, you don't want to expend more calories than you're taking in, otherwise you're going to starve to death. So, and most predators have actually a very low success rate when it comes to hunting. Like, I think the highest one is the dragonfly with a 90% success rate. Most, like, big cats, like the big predators we think of have, like, somewhere between the 20 and 40% success rate. So it could be it just, like, rather than, like, okay, it ate, like, 1,000 passengers in, like, a short stint, if it still sense like, oh, there's a couple morsels still on here, well, maybe I attack a boat every couple decades or so, and, like, I'll just make sure I get every little bit before going back underwater to hibernate for a bit. It could have been a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B of intelligence versus predatory nature.
It is very interesting, the idea that it directs them to its larder.
I almost want to say it's a vomitorium from, like, ancient Rome, which wasn't really a thing. It's popularized by the Victorians. The idea was that ancient Romans would indulge in so much food, they would end up vomiting it out to indulge some more. Well, this creature, the octolus, which, honestly, this kind of method of eating applies to owls, of all things, because it doesn't eat its prey, it drinks them, like a spider almost. So it ends up regurgitating the hard calcium skeletons of people, or assumedly fish in its native environment. But they end up finding the room where, like, all the bones of the former passengers are located.
Well, I think that gives us the detail, the describing the biology of a creature like this gives us the detail that makes this a fun, new, scary type of monster, is that we get to see Billy half digested.
Yes.
We get to see it. It's unfathomable to have a creature that has mouths on the ends of every single one of its tentacles, of which we truly don't have a count of. But we get to see the cool stuff that they do with it. It can grab and drag you around. That's what it does to Mamuli. But it completely, in just like 3 gulps, takes Jason Flemyng down. It very slowly eats
Hanover?
Yeah, Hanover. I could not get West Studi's name out of my head. But it very slowly eats him. There's a bunch of different ways that, in showing us a movie, we're gonna have this multi-talented creature do things many different ways. It's going to creep up on you and drip slime over Joey's head, leading to the reveal that it's right above you. It can move silently.
It comes up from the toilet. The first victim. The first victim of the octolus is this poor lady who, after the beast slams into the ship and all the passengers are panicking and fleeing, she runs to the bathroom and hides, and it comes up. Yeah. We don't see it then, but it comes up out the toilet and gets her.
There's a lot of fun things that we can do with this monster. Of course, we have to throw some things out the window. Does it make sense for it to wrap up one of the morsels, we'll say, in Finnegan to, like, I want to take a look at you with my eyeball. What's that boomstick you've got? Not my eye. Like, does it make sense? No, but it does let us have fun with this monster. Which I think the movie is. Like, this is a fun movie.
Exactly.
And the different aspects that are done with the monster, and even just in avoidance of it, are kind of what's entertaining the most.
Looking back, like, regardless of how it's aged, storytelling-wise and character-wise, it is a fun movie with both just the action and the creature design. And Joey Patucci's one-liners were great.
Yeah.
The comic relief, he did a really good job. And he obviously became a veteran of Stephen Sommers movies because he was Benny in The Mummy, the first Mummy. And he played Igor in Van Helsing.
Yeah, despite this flop, director Stephen Sommers managed to finally make it to the big-time hit of The Mummy in the next year. And I don't know, maybe he learned a lot from this movie, figured out sort of how to balance the different kinds of genres that are being used in amongst the horror moments.
I feel like he definitely got the characters better, because there's definitely more... The characters in the Mummy are a little bit more rounded and dimensional. I would argue in Deep Rising, I think the only really dimensional character is Patucci.
Yeah.
Because we see, like, the full gamut of his emotions. And he is the only... Like, no one in this movie really has a character arc. Like, the jerks get justice, and that's kind of like it for character progression. Like, Finnegan starts off the movie as Finnegan. He ends the movie as Finnegan. But poor Petrucci, he loses Layla, who was his girlfriend, and suffers that trauma. He's gonna have PTSD for a while, I bet, after that.
Gets shot in the leg.
Yeah, gets shot in the leg.
Nearly gets cut in half by a surfboard.
And then he has that moral quandary, because we were talking about how Hanover was getting slowly eaten. Well, he was getting slowly eaten. That moment gave Petrucci a moral quandary, because there was a gun nearby. He picks up the gun, and Hanover then grabs, jump scare, grabs his arm, and you see that he's being slowly eaten on a pool table, I think, or a card table. And so Petrucci, he goes to run off with the gun, and he pauses, and he turns around and he gives the gun to Hanover with the idea of okay, you don't have to go out in a painful way. He even says, don't say I never did anything for you. And then he goes to leave, and Hanover tries to shoot him out of spite. And then Petrucci curses him out.
Finally, the infinite bullets run out.
Yes, and karmic justice. Because that's what happens to jerks in movies like this. When Hanover does try to take the easy way out, the gun is out of bullets, and he has to suffer getting drunk by the Octolus.
So, in conclusion, the Octolus is actually a sarlacc, and it will digest you for 1,000 years.
Aquatic sarlacc.
Spoilers for the currently airing Boba Fett show. There are implications that there used to be an ocean on Tatooine, and so, headcanon, the sarlacc and the Octolus are the same creature.
And they just evolved over time.
Yep.
Well, I mean, there are some fish that, like the African lungfish, they can live underground in the sand in a little mud pit for decades, even, and survive till the last monsoon, to the next monsoon season during the droughts.
This all works very well for me. One of the other big stars of this, of course, are the VFX and the set design here. Dustin, what are your thoughts on the cruise ship, the Argonautica, compared to our last one?
Yeah, compared to the Titanic. I actually really felt like this was complete. Now, there were a lot of things about this movie that I felt were complete. And completion doesn't mean perfection, or
right.
It doesn't mean that this is because they finished that it's great. But seeing it brightly lit and everyone having fun and everyone gambling. I believe one of the fun little trivia things about this movie is that they're trying to show a foreign currency to make it seem ooh, wow, this is fancy. But what they're showing are 1,000 and 2,000 lira notes, which are essentially dollar bills
in Italy.
Yeah, because they're not worth that much. But you get to see it brightly lit. I love the zoom in shot on the cruise ship, for its sheer size, but also just you get to see it in luxury, and then you get to see it in tatters, kind of Jurassic Park style. You get to see what it should look like, and then you get to see what it looks like ruined. I think it feels real. Sometimes the remains of what's in the ballroom are their own hazards. Aside from the ballroom itself, a lot of this movie happens in these sort of tunnels underneath, mechanical service, pathways, and
bowels of the
that's
ship.
Fun.
This is what you get for going to the machine room, and they have a good reason for going down there.
Yep, they're looking for the ship parts.
Yep.
Right, and that's just it, is that they are in these places, and then you've got, they did a good job covering these bases several times over, and sometimes it's done with just an ADR, look, an island, but they will straight up okay, one of the guys, Mulligan, played by Jason Flemyng, he's got a little electronic map of the ship, he uploaded a blueprint to where he knows on the other side of this flooded hallway, it's only 20 meters until we can get out. If it weren't for that, plus the knowledge provided by the owner of the ship, then, that's a foolish way to die, is to dive into that water. So, they have schematics of where to go. They essentially know what is around the corner or on the other side of a wall. Thanks to Canton's knowledge of the ship, which would be impossible. Of course, he would not know that. But little things there's probably a bay where there are jet skis, because as a cruise ship, it's going to have all of these amenities. And like, so, yeah, this is like the underbelly of the ship. Everything about what happens on that ship seems like, this is accurate, or at least accurate enough.
Trillian survives the initial onslaught because she gets caught pickpocketing the captain and trying to break into this vault, and they don't have a brig, or they say it's not completed yet.
It's an unfinished brig, so
So they put her in a freezer, which is an airtight room. So that's probably the reason she survived the first attack, was because she was in a room that the Octolus couldn't get into initially. And a bunch of the survivors camped out in the vault too for that reason.
Yeah.
And she had a bottle of champagne and looks like a fun little sushi spread to eat. That's nice. I will say that is a problem for me, though, is that drinking directly out of a freshly popped champagne bottle is extremely unpleasant. I don't recommend it again. It will fizz up on you. It's not good for like your lungs and your guts. It feels bad. But hey, she was having her own little party and she was safe, and we were happy to have that.
Yeah. One of the things that is less well explained or developed is the boat for hire that Finnegan and his crew are piloting around. This is actually like a World War II sea-air salvage or rescue boat. And so it makes sense for it to have that gun on the back. And it just increases my desire for Finnegan to be like an older, very experienced guy who's been out on the sea forever, like
a salty sea captain.
A salty sea World War II veteran.
I guess more like a Quint, like from Jaws.
Yes, exactly, Quint. You have spoiled my recast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not actually annoyed. I'm just. It's so funny that you struck on it.
All right, we'll just get some necromancy and revive Robert Shaw.
That's very funny because it would just be it would be so fitting for them to have like an old war story, and that's why he has this particular boat.
It could potentially. One thing that irked me a little bit, this movie does have a Linnets love interest, not essential to story. So, like, they kind of shoehorned Trillian and Finnegan ending up together, in my opinion, which it's an action movie. You have to have the gratuitous leading love interest for the leading man. The one thing, though, was we couldn't figure out what the name of Finnegan's ship was, the Hercules or Jezebel, because they referred to something called Jezebel.
Those were the names of the engines.
Okay.
Oh, it has two engines.
Yeah, Jezebel is the left engine, and Hercules is the right.
Okay.
Both of them got shot.
When I did catch the name Hercules, though, I thought that was very clevering foreshadowing, because in the Legend of Hercules, one of his 12 labors was the fight the Lamian Hydra, which, those who know their Greek mythology, was a beast that has one body, but multiple heads that actually regenerate when you cut them off into like two heads. But the idea is one body, multiple heads, and it foreshadows, because at first you think, oh, there's multiple creatures running around. You find out at the end, no, it's one monster with multiple feeding mouths.
What an insight. JD, we gotta talk Dungeons & Dragons one day.
Oh, I just introduced to Nathan his first Dungeons & Dragons game last weekend.
Yes,
All right, we have to insert pause. We can't talk Dungeons and Dragons on this podcast. It will go for hours.
unless we do the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out way back in the day.
Hard pass. But that's cool. No, that's actually the idea that like the Hydra as being one body, multiple heads, and like the connection with the Octolus here. I would have never thought of that. That's awesome. But right, we don't know the name of that boat, and I like that kind of the feel of like this crew does their thing. You feel like Finnegan, Layla, Joey. Is it just the three of them?
Yeah.
You feel like they've worked together for a while. You feel like they're
Joey and Layla are a couple.
Well, right, but you feel like they work together and have worked together as if like this could be the movie at the end of 5 previous TV seasons of them doing shenanigans.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like they're close-knit. I didn't really feel that way about the mercenary crew.
Maybe, yeah. That they were sort of hodgepodge thrown together.
It seemed like
I don't know if maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but there was one kind of line that got cut off, and based on Jason Flemyng's reaction when he found out T-Ray died, I thought they might have been a couple.
A couple, yeah. Yeah, it does kind of get cut off. I noticed that, too.
Because Jason Flemyng goes, he was mine, and it gets cut off. It was
yeah.
Right. I think he's also the only one that really shows any, the word isn't empathy, but sort of connection to anyone, because he also responds that way when the most unlikable of the crew, Mason, dies. He says something like, "Oh no, not Mason," and I'm sitting there going like, who cared about that a-hole? Like, he was the worst.
Yeah, they go out of their way to make the mercenaries unlikable. Like, the one of them, Mamoli, is it Mamoli? One of them is a womanizer. Like, he just... He's just hound dogging on girls all the time. They're just... The other guy was trying to gross out T-Ray purposely to make him throw up. Like, they make them unlikable so that you have... satisfaction when they get eaten.
In some foreshadowing for the later scene where another eye gets popped in the movie.
Oh, yeah, a good call there. Yeah, I believe it's one of those other little, like, facts about the movie is kind of rough. They apparently intentionally cast men who tested as ugly to be the mercenaries so that you would not like them. But I'm a bro, so when it comes to, like, the whole himbo style, them, like, teaming up to make one of the other ones, like, throw up, them kind of teasing each other all the time, every bit about them I actually kind of did attach to those guys, except for when they were beating up Joey. I did not like them.
Yeah, well, that's again to make them villainize them.
Right.
Get us in the camp.
I'm doing the exact opposite of what the movie wants you to do. It's like, I'm liking these guys. Yeah, I want to hang out with them.
Yeah, I mean, even like Hanover does have really good commanding presence too over this. Like, he's like the camp counselor or like the frat house leader. Because I think it's Mulligan when like they're trapped in the kitchen and Mulligan's freaking out and Hanover says, "Stand down, soldier, before I put you down." Like, that's a commanding line.
Studi is great in this movie. He has instant command of any room that he's in.
Yeah.
He's one of these people who can just like look stern and silence the room in the movie, and it just works. You believe it totally.
Yeah,
that's true. That you guys just brought up two things. The first one is, he calls Jason Flemyng's character soldier. Are these guys military, or were they military? They're certainly not part of any nationally backed outfit. So just using the term soldier, they needed to get that out of there because they're clearly not in any official chain of command. The second thing, you're right about Wes Studi, who's a guy that's been in everything over decades and decades. But there is one thing that irked me. I'm going to say like maybe an inconsistency was he's very early in the movie. He's talking to Finnegan, being like, you're getting us to where we need to go. How far are we away? 22 minutes. And that's when the motto is brought up. Like, if you've got the cash, like, you don't ask any questions. And he goes, Hanover goes, "You really don't want to know where we're going?" Like, dude, you got the deal of a lifetime. Why are you egging him on? No, he doesn't want to know where we're going. That's the whole deal. So, like, that's the only thing that, like, didn't really fit with that. But, the performance there from Wes Studi,
I can see it.
Certainly commands the room.
I can see that line kind of fishing to see, like, kind of test, like, is Finnegan going to double cross us?
Yeah.
Like,
or even trying to push him. Like, I would really like to just take this ship and be in true total control.
Yeah, give me a reason.
Yeah, he's great. And he and Treat Williams have some pretty good chemistry. There's some really great moments, like especially that corridor scene when the monster is crunching in the walls of the corridor and approaching them.
They haven't shown the tentacles. The walls are buckling, so we get the idea this thing is strong enough to bend steel. And Hanover kicks the gun up and to hand it to Treat.
After they've just had this argument about, don't you dare touch guns, it's like, okay, but I need you right now.
Yeah, it's like...
Okay, but you can have this gun now.
Yeah, or we're gonna die.
Yeah.
Because that's when they first like find the hallway of like all the digested people.
Yeah, that is a...
Well, once again, the movie goes through so many efforts to like make things make sense so that you don't do the thing of trying to pick it apart. What we know about most firearms is that when you submerge them in water, they no longer work. But when they're passing out the guns, I believe the last phrase after like 1,000-round mag is like completely watertight to where you could submerge and use it. So like, okay, thank you for giving us that. Now we know why it works.
Yeah.
Like little things like that are nice.
Yeah. I mean, those are machine guns that in actuality have a 100-round magazine in them that is all blanks, and the single barrel of that actual machine gun has been then wrapped with a motorized spinning drum that has 5 fake barrels. So if you look very closely, what's happening is that the actual real center barrel is firing its blanks and getting its muzzle flash that way, but then the other barrels are just rotating around it as that happens. So, I mean, they look good. They're cool guns, and they sell. This movie is very good at selling the cool of things.
Yeah.
It sells.
Good point.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's all these lines that are dropped in throughout the movie, like you've mentioned earlier, the "Oh, I know all about you" Finnegan line from Canton at one point, and the sense there's just these little here and there bits sprinkled in that imply that they have a history before. This, I think, is still in the era of the movie of the, what I'll call the iconic hero team, where you never introduce a backstory. They just, the first movie you show them, it's like Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
where
they show up as is.
They show up as is. Like in Ghostbusters, they sort of form the team in that movie, but they very much feel like they're not coming out of nowhere. They already have a rapport. They're not starting from zero. This is a movie that starts in the middle, and it feels like it's setting up another movie that would be on that island afterwards if it did.
From what I was reading online, apparently, before, like, Steve Sommers got handed The Mummy, they were considering handing him a reboot of King Kong. So that was supposed to be foreshadowing that. So.
A new monster universe.
It makes total sense. I actually thought about that last night. It makes total sense.
It feels
they wound up on Skull Island. And I think Skull Island is canonically in the Pacific, too.
It is. Yeah. And now I'm reminded of just how much I love the lore of that world, of the monsters world.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, it totally seems like that would fit in. And the Octolus is of seemingly the scale of these other gigantic movie monsters. So that's, makes a lot of sense.
Though we did see in, maybe it's a backwards reference, in the Kong Skull Island, there is that part where King Kong eats that, like, freshwater giant squid. So maybe Kong would win against the Octolus.
Oh, I put Kong as winning most matchups, but maybe that's just because I'm, like I said, I'm a pro, so I'm a King Kong fan.
Fortunately, yes, that's what the Octolus's bigger mouth is for, is when it encounters the larger kaiju.
Yeah. I see, like it'd be like a cookie cutter shark, too, because there is a type of shark called a cookie cutter shark. They're only like 5 inches long, very tiny, but they literally go up to large prey like great whites and whales and seals, and they go up and literally scoop, their jaws are structured in such a way they scoop out a divot, and it looks like a cookie cut, so they're the cookie cutter shark.
That's fun, because like I was thinking, sometimes when we look back at, like, what did you expect out of this movie? I did not expect the Octopus. What did I expect? I don't know. When I was, like, writing out, like, what I would say, what did I expect? I don't know, mermen? I don't know. 12 or so different smaller creatures, as opposed to one kaiju-sized one. You don't really know what to expect, and that's kind of fun, for anyone seeing it for the first time, is that you don't know. And so you're on the same boat as everyone.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've talked about it a lot, but there are some really great effects and visuals in this movie. JD, do you want to go over some of what makes that so great?
One of the things I appreciate about this movie, because I remember catching this program as a kid, and I looked it up on the internet, I could not find it again. It was like a behind-the-scenes program on TV. I think it might have been on Discovery Channel, where it was like a whole bunch of, here's like how they did a bunch of effects in various movies, and there was a segment where they were talking about Deep Rising, and I recognized the movie as a kid, like, oh, that's the one with the giant octopus monster with the mouths that eat people. And because we discussed before how the creature regurgitates the hard skeletons of its prey, and the cast gets herded to, like, the larder, where they find, like, the thousands of digested skeletons of the former passengers. And I remember as a kid seeing, they actually did all that in miniature, like diorama size. Like, little teeny tiny skeletons painted in gooey gook, and in this, like, hall room, like, big hangar room. And then later, when the ship does its obligatory explosion, because anytime you have a ship in a movie, it has to sink, when it starts flooding, I saw like the behind the scenes clip was they took like a garden hose and flooded it to wash out all the skeletons, and I thought that was kind of cool. And also too, like, again, this was like still in the infancy of CGI, so the Oculus itself, I think, holds up pretty well, especially when you consider like the era of CGI it comes from. I think having it be like almost like a gelatinous creature lends to it, holding up decently well.
No, good point.
There was one particular shot where I'm pretty sure they forgot to do one level of rendering on the tentacles though, because they were like a matte brown instead of textured. But most of it hands up pretty well, but they still relied a lot on practical effects, like the shot where they're running down the hallway and you see the floorboards popping up and explosions as the tentacle is, chasing them. Very reminiscent of Tremors coming from them underneath, and then like the practicality of like the gooey skeletons everywhere. Nathan and I were talking, like, what was the explosion budget and what was the slime budget for this movie? And then, they actually did, like, the probably the most famous kill in this movie is the half-digested Billy scene, where they shoot the tentacle and it spits out a half-digested dude. And you could tell, like, it's half practical effects, and the there is CGI involved in it, but it's used so sparingly. Like, you could definitely tell, like, it was the step they needed before they could achieve the Mummy, when they had Imhotep in his various stages of decomposition. But like, it was very well done, and also good acting from the actor there. For that's the behavior I would expect of a dude whose half his brain is currently digested.
Yeah, they did a good job. He did a great job of looking like that emerging from a tentacle. The exact good amount of job that he did. He did a bad job acting as if he'd ever smoked a cigarette before, but he did a great job. He did a great job of looking like he just got exploded out of a tentacle. So it's good to give and take.
Yeah, and this is a movie that a lot of the digital visual effects ended up being made by Industrial Light and Magic, and had delayed the movie a long time because they were so advanced for the time. I mean, this is an early CGI movie to be doing complicated, many-limbed octopus tentacles. There's actually a note from like during the making of Finding Nemo movie, they had an octopus, and that was actually the very most complicated thing to make in there, because the behavior of the tentacles and making them feel like they're moving deliberately but in a lugubrious, gooey way. Yeah,
because octopi, they don't have any bones. They're more or less pneumatic powered.
Yeah. So getting that to feel right, and it's pretty cool. The movement is mostly pretty convincing in this movie. So good job them, but it did delay you until you landed in the sights of Titanic. So
obviously we just gotta send the Oculus after the Titanic to take out the competition. That's what happened. The iceberg's a cover up. The Titanic's really the victim of an Oculus.
I'm not ruling it out.
The Oculus was in the iceberg, trapped, and the Titanic broke it out.
Hey, the sky's the limit when it comes to monsters and what you can do with them, right? I mean, who's to say that this creature is the only one like it, and who's to say that there's not one creature like it in each ocean?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it also had to have come from somewhere. It's modeled after organisms we're familiar with, so that implies that, it had to be the offspring of something. It did not just come fully formed out of the Mariana Trench or something. So it had to have been bred from something.
Yep.
I like this.
Great. This has been an excellent discussion, but I believe that it is time to move on to our final segment. Let's hand out some superlatives. We start, as always, with our MVP category. Dustin, who or what is your MVP for this movie?
MVP here is Kevin O'Connor and the writing of his character Joey. Because his presence makes the movie more fun, and the movie needs it. We need the scales tipped towards this is a fun romp through this escapade, as opposed to this is more serious and scary. We need the tone to be shifted towards, oh, that's kind of funny, instead of grip your seat in horror. And I think his character and his portrayal does that for us. So I think I'm not going to say he saves the movie, but he gives us the tone at which we should appreciate it. So he gets the MVP from it.
And he probably, like, helped set the tone for, like, Stephen Sommers when he then did The Mummy, because The Mummy definitely capitalizes on that humor and has it more refined and spread across a whole bunch of characters as opposed to having it distilled into one singular comedic relief character.
Yeah. Well, and let's say, I mean, hey, it's not as if Famke Janssen as Trillian isn't funny. She has comedic lines. I do think they fall flat comparatively. But also, Treat Williams as Finnegan, like, they are cracking wise a lot. And it's not until, cracking, it's a joke a minute. But it's better to have the one guy who's mostly jokes, and then everyone else can kind of fit into that theme as opposed to just like we have one guy who's always goofing up. So I think that's why he gets such high praise from me.
All right, JD.
My MVP goes to the Octolus. It's the reason I watch this movie. It's the reason I enjoy this movie. Excellent creature design, horrifying creature design. Like, it hits like all the right parts of skeeve, and between the body horror of its victims and just the overall creature design. Like I said, drawing inspiration from bobbit worms and cephalopods and vampire squids and all that. It's like the grain of truth that's in the pearl of the horror.
Yeah, it gets a great build-up. Before you see it, you're scared by it. You see all sorts of terrifying evidence.
Exactly. The first couple victims, you don't see any kind of tentacle or any kind of body at all. It's like they took a page from Jaws. You don't see it. Like, you just see people getting dragged through the water. And then finally when it's revealed, it's like, oh, it's a bunch of snakes. And then it's like, oh no, it's a huge octopode.
Yeah, it's a great mystery. Is a great mystery design, and I'm going to go with the MVP actually as Bob Bupkin, who is the designer of the monster and of the special makeup effects of the movie. Spectacular job of giving this movie its horror visuals.
Yeah, especially now knowing that Bob Bupkin, who also did like he did The Thing, it makes sense. Oh yeah, that makes sense why the body horror and like the gore effects look very like have the same pedigree, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move down to our next category here, the Best Supporting Actor or Actress. Dustin.
For me, I'm going to go Wes Studi as Hanover for his presence, and that comes from experience, not necessarily how the character is written, but just his presence. I had originally thought that I think Canton's character, so Anthony Heald as Canton, I almost went that way, but I realized that I was mainly just being pulled by like his necessary role in how the story must happen. And that's why it was getting my attention. But when in reality, it was Wes Studi's acting that gets him the best supporting for me.
Yeah. JD.
My best supporting, since I did give my MVP to the Octolus, goes to Kevin O'Connor as Joey Patucci, because I feel like out of all the characters, he was less one, like he's the only one we saw like go through any dimension, because he goes through the loss of his girlfriend and we see him like mourn her and like, and comic relief and stuff, and like he's the curious one. He's the one that first investigates that it's like, wait, why do these mercenaries we have on our boat have torpedoes? Like, what are they doing? Like, he's like, I felt like out of all the cast, he probably had the most dimension, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. For my own support, I'm actually going to call out Famke Janssen, who I do think in the beginning of this movie, she does a really great job of selling a almost, gem thief kind of personality who you're excited for her plot to take its course there. And I think she's pretty compelling the rest of the movie, despite the fact that she has such a small role in kind of...
Would it have been interesting if like her target to steal was like something that had drawn the Octolus?
All great ideas here.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, have it all interconnect.
Yeah, that would have been spectacular. Oh, man.
The other idea we had was what if she had been like a sleeper Interpol agent or something?
Or that, yeah. Anything to tie her more into the plot, because she's great whenever she's on screen.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
She could have literally been anything.
Yeah.
She did not have to be a jewel thief. She did not have to be a pickpocket. She could have been anything. No, you know what? We can't say that because they did do a good job. If she was not somehow doing a criminal act, then the captain would not have thrown her in the kitchen brig. So, like, it had to happen that way.
Not necessarily. She might have been found out that she was snooping around to what the plot was.
Yeah, if she was, like, Interpol and, like, investigating, Canton could have been like, oh, crap, she's gonna find out my insurance scam idea, shove her in the freezer.
Yes.
Shove her in the freezer. She's gonna find my CD-ROMs that melt. My CD-ROMs that melt ships from the core.
Oh, 90s.
I'm imagining that what this is that it's like overclocking software for a computer, and all it's doing is just totally killing the cooling fans, or just turning off all the cooling fans on the ship's computers.
Don't you bring common sense into this?
I'm trying to save this. Next up on our list is the hidden gem for this movie. Dustin, what do you got?
Derrick O'Connor as Captain Abernathy. He's a hidden gem because the movie hides him, because we don't get enough of him. I thought he would have been fun as part of the survival crew. We've already split up, like, different archetypes. We didn't really talk about the archetypes, but, like, of who is left. And in the end, we don't have each of those archetypes shine, but as having somebody who was actually crew member and has the experience of being on the water, I guess in a different way than Finnegan. Like that would have been fun, but yeah, he's a hidden gem because we didn't get enough of him.
He also had a memorable death too. I don't know, like, I've seen his one leg, like, he's getting ripped down through the catwalk, and just the fact, like, his leg pops.
His leg, yeah, he gets folded up like a pizza
basically.
slice.
It was like, again, certain aspects of body horror skeeved me out, and that was one of them.
Yep. JD?
I'm gonna go my hidden gem, the Hercules reference, because I'm not 100% sure if it was intentional, but if it was, good on them.
Yeah, that is a great connection to showing you that they have done their research, that they love these monsters too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and for me, actually, I'll pull out one of the cast who didn't get as much of a role as probably she should have. Una Damon as Layla is great at the beginning of the movie. She has great rapport with Joey and John Finnegan, and it seems like she should have had a bigger role going forward in the movie. It would be great if this crew all together in, sequels down the line if the movie had been a little bit more successful. So next on our list is to recast one cast member. Dustin, who would you switch out in this movie?
So I have to explain it a little bit. I'm going to go with the role of Vivo, who's played by Djimon Hounsou, who I love. They waste him. They waste Djimon. And so, because of that, I'd like to put in Alan Cumming instead of Hounsou. And Alan Cumming, specifically sort of the Boris Grishenko style. I think we need a techie science guy. Instead of, I believe Vivo's role is to blow up the vault, and he ends up getting the card to open the vault when he opens the door and then gets an axe to the face. He's completely wasted, so what if we make his character a little different, where he's the one that reveals the info about the Otoya? Because he's this techie science guy, and he's got the info. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me that Canton is like, let me tell you about these creatures that at 30,000 feet are this size, but that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But having one of the crew guys, or maybe it's one of the mercenaries, he's like, oh, I'm here to be a demolitions guy, but my background is actually in biology or I don't have to explain it that much further, but that's the only reason I'm recasting it, because I'd love to see Djimon in a better role. I mean, speaking of boat movies, he was incredible in Amistad. But I'd love to see that. I think he's just wasted. So let's change the character in order to do this recast.
All right, JD, who would you switch out?
My recasting is less of a substitute an actor, because honestly, I thought all the actors did great with their roles. It's just some roles were more rounded than others and flatter than others. So my recasting would actually be instead to switch the main protagonist, because it's mostly, John Finnegan as the everyday hero man of the action film. I actually want to see Patucci as the focus as the main character, because his character has the most dimension. B, it'd be interesting. You have this big action movie. You think it's John, everyday hero man is going to be the lead, and then you find out you're actually following the beleaguered mechanic who gets bullied around. Like, I thought that'd be an interesting point of perspective for a movie of like this.
Yeah, and you'd get some time where, like, he and Layla swap complaints about how annoying Finnegan's captaincy is.
Yeah.
As they're both sent off the bridge while Finnegan plays solitaire.
Yeah.
Hey, flag on the play. That's an excellent change one thing. Where's your recast, JD?
We had this discussion, I decided to allow it.
Okay.
I have a different change one thing.
It's okay. The extra lineman has reported eligible to go downfield. You got permission. Fine. I put my hands up in the air. We're good.
Review in the booth has come back.
Yeah.
So for my recast, what strikes me in this movie is that Finnegan is very much the everyday action hero kind of type, but I don't think that really fits this. And I feel like, as I've alluded to before, it would be awesome if he were played by Robert Shaw as Quint in Jaws, but probably Robert Shaw from the same era, because it would be so awesome if you had this old World War II era sea captain who has had horrible experiences in the water, tells terrifying stories, and it's him who reveals knowledge about the monster.
And because I'm not 100% sure if it was World War I or World War II. There was a case where an Allied vessel got sunk, and there were 6 survivors hanging on to, like, they couldn't, like, get into the boat properly. They were hanging on. World War I. It was World War I, and they were hanging on to the boat. And because all 5 of the eyewitness accounts match up, they're pretty sure this legit happened. A guy got picked off by a giant squid. Like, it came up out of the depths and dragged him under.
Who better?
And it would add this soldier dynamic if Hanover was like for military too.
Yeah, and then he's judging the mercenaries for not being real soldiers. Like, oh my gosh, you terrible turncoats.
Maybe this could be a movie that could be rebooted.
I think we're about to figure out some ideal things here. So let's
crack open this oyster.
Let's open this bottle here. Get to the juicy fish inside.
Get the fish.
Yeah, let's go straight to change one thing here. JD.
My change one thing would be to expand more on Layla. Either let her survive longer in the film, or her death, like, she gets dragged out of she's in the middle of repairing the ship by mindlessly blowtorching a random piece of metal. So either, if she has to go in that moment, have her fend off the tentacle, or even her assailant, unknown assailant, like, don't show the tentacle, just show her fending off her assailant with a freaking blowtorch. That would actually be pretty cool. And also, give her some more agency in her demise, so to speak. Like, she went down fighting, or just let her last longer. Because then if she manages to survive longer in the film, it's so much more of a gut punch when Petrucci discovers that she didn't make it.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. Having a little more of her because she's close to Joey, like that, I like that as well. I mean, it's not only because she's close to Joey. I thought it was a kind of a fun, cool character, and we just didn't get enough.
Dustin, what would you change?
All right, buckle up.
All right.
The enemy of this movie is a giant Otoya.
Uh-huh.
What do we change? We eliminate the scenes in the beginning where the mercenaries are himboing it up and trying to make T-Ray puke.
Uh-huh.
Instead, we use that time to see either the international mercenaries or just someone else observing, maybe on the land, maybe on a boat, a curio shop, or maybe a street game where people are betting on animals. Think of cockfighting. Think of just like wondrous things to look at. Or just being general street urchins. Well, one of the games, one of the things one of the visuals they're looking at is that exact description of the octopus getting the fish inside the bottle. Or maybe one of the things we're looking at is, have you ever seen an octopus like unscrew a mason jar to get out? Like, so you're seeing something wild. But it's at the scale that we expect. Maybe there's a starfish inside the bottle. Maybe there's a little piranha or something. They're betting who's going to win. I don't know what that could be, but the idea of having that very early in the movie, and then 50 minutes later we see deep sea gigantism as, this was a bit of a foreshadowing. Because as I mentioned, I didn't know what to expect. If you were to add something like that at the beginning, I think that could be a lot of fun.
They said Finnegan was the one that brought up the baby octopus in the bottle. If we were to recast him as a Rob Shaw scout, like, sea dog.
He would know.
Or have him have a pet octopus instead of a parrot in the beginning. And show him feeding the octopus via bottle.
Yes.
Yeah.
This
totally.
is great.
We see maybe it's the mercenaries. Like, what's going on in here, Finnegan? Oh, yeah, you gotta check out Roxy, my octopus. Watch this. And, yeah, so, like, the idea that we have a connection somewhere, because I think what we have is a heist insurance scam gets interrupted by something for no reason. But if we connect it to just one extra little thing, like what we've just brainstormed here, I think that could be awesome.
Yeah. And for my change one thing, I'm out for that lifeboat plot hole that we mentioned earlier. Because how creepy would it be if instead of just approaching this cruise ship all like dark at night, you're approaching a cruise ship with a full stock of lifeboats all in the water and all of them empty.
Oh, like maybe blood residue, like they got them in the lifeboats?
Maybe, yeah. Or just nothing.
Or the lifeboats are full of hatching octopod eggs. And so you can't get in, otherwise they're going to feed on you.
I say if they introduce eggs, that could bring up a whole other thing, because female octopi, they only breed once, because that's one reason why squids have octopi, even though they have human intelligence. The reason they have not taken over is because they don't live very long, because they mostly die after breeding, because, well, the male legit goes senile and just wanders off and dies of octopus Alzheimer's after mating. Female octopi, their eggs take like, I think 2 to 3 years to actually hatch, and she'll basically make like a little den, and she'll camp with them that entire time. She will not eat or leave her babies that entire time. So she, kind of like how some species of spiders, they will starve themselves to death to make sure the next generation comes out. So the reason we don't have squid overlords is because they don't survive long enough to live long enough to machinate their plans.
We don't have enough time to listen to them. They're gone by the time we pay attention.
That could add a whole other aspect too. Like, what if the Octolus attacked a ship to make it like its breeding den, lay eggs, and then have
there
like
we go. That would make sense.
What if that's what they found at the back of the ship? Instead of just like all the bodies, like they found all the bodies with like young octopus.
I see what you're saying.
It looked for a source of food for its babies, because other animals do that. There's I think it's a tarantula hawk wasp, where it will sting a tarantula, bring it back to its egg den, and so that its newborn babies has something to eat. So it could be that's why it attacks ships, is to collect baby food for its little munchkins.
Yep. All right. Well, we've patched up a lot of plot holes here, patched up the way this movie works out, but let's move on to some things that this movie did spectacularly. What, Dustin, for you, is the best shot of this movie?
JD mentioned it. It's when Abernathy gets swallowed. It is the, I think, the cleanest, quickest swallowing. You see the strength of the tentacle itself, and then as soon as like 1 inch is given, it kind of like cocoons up and grabs him all at once and takes him down. I thought that was really clean looking. And it shows kind of up close just how quick this thing can get you. So I thought that was the best shot.
JD?
My best shot was the head reveal, when they reveal like, oh, it's all one creature. And also too, particularly the eye, because however they animated the eye, it is very true to life of deep sea invertebrates. Like, it looks exactly like a vampire squid eye, with the way the eyes, like the gleam reflection. In fact, we were looking up the cover art, and it shows like the big close-up of an eye. They put a pupil in the eye on the cover art when it's pupilless, like a true deep sea squid.
It's kind of milky, cloudy.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Like, if you look up a video of a vampire squid, it looks exactly like how it does on the Octolus. And like, you did your animal research very well. Good job.
Yep. For me, it's the shot of the Argonautica blowing up. This is a 110-foot model. So we talked about, obviously, the model of the Titanic were even bigger, but 110 foot is a pretty substantial model to build for this movie.
That is longer than my house.
That is a big, big thing to blow up. That must have been awesome to do. So
I imagine one take only if it's a model that big, though.
I would imagine that is one of those terrifying, nail-biting, you get one chance for this shot. Better put it to use, and it works great. Moving a little bit broader, let's go out to best scene. Dustin.
Best scene here. jet ski tentacle chase through a claustrophobic and elaborate underbelly of flooded mechanical and service passageways toward an elevator that must be shot open with a sawed-off shotgun and then closed again to force the tentacles to comedically jam into the closing wrought iron doors. That's the best scene, y'all.
It is totally awesome. Morbius from the Loki show would be proud.
Skidoo!
Skidoos! JD?
My best scene is the half-digested Billy scene. Just because it's the first time we get a glimpse of the actual, of the CGI flesh monster, but also, again, because of the melding of the practical effects and CGI effects, and just how traumatic, not many, movie monsters, they usually, take you out quick, and you're done, but, the fact, you're drunk, and, the horror, like I said, I'm not, a gore hound, but I do appreciate the practical effects that go into, horror movie makeup, and, the practicality, especially since I know how to do, mold making and casting for stuff like that, so, it was just, that, as a kid, that was, the scene that stuck with me, both the trauma of his half-digested brain screaming and just how he looked. It was oh, dude, this is bad. This is bad if you get caught by this thing.
Yep. Yeah, that is a spectacular and very disturbing effect that really sells you on, you do not want to die to this monster. So then when later the evil leader of the mercenaries goes out with karmic justice, it's all the sweeter. And
it makes them more panicky too. You see Mulligan have his existential crisis in the kitchen, and it amps when we get panicky, you get stupid.
Yep.
And when you get stupid, you become fish food.
Yep. For me, my favorite scene was when finally Hanover decides to trust Finnegan just enough to kick the gun to him as the tentacles are starting to crush the walls in around them. This is, I think, the moment in the movie when it turns from being the action movie, Die Hard-esque kind of mystery plot to being truly a survival horror movie, because this is when the characters realize, hey, no matter what we were doing before, no matter what this movie was about before this moment, it is now about surviving the monster. And it's just a very strong moment for me. Next up is the best wardrobe or makeup moment. Dustin, what'd you see?
This is Joey's hat. It is absolutely necessary to this movie. First of all, it makes him visually more fun, because he kind of looks like a Smurf or a gnome. His hair is terrible.
He's an
so it works to cover that up. And that's probably a Kevin O'Connor problem, not a Joey problem. Also, the hat allows Treat Williams to do some actual emotional acting later on when he finds the hat. So it is the best wardrobe item, I think. But I do want to add on, tack something onto this, which is it's really difficult to make long hair look good on camera when it's wet.
Yeah.
And they halfway accomplish that with Famke Janssen, but they completely abandon it with Kevin O'Connor, which is why the hat is so helpful.
My best wardrobe moment goes to the fact that they allowed Trillian to get out of that slinky red dress into actual practical clothing. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let the female character have some practical clothing to survive the rest of the movie in.
Yeah.
All right. For me, it's just gotta be the hilarious Finnegan's dad flannel that he's just running around the whole movie. Hi, everybody, I'm the everyman, and I've been thrown into this for some reason, and I'm just gonna deal with it.
Gonna make a run to Home Depot later. You wanna get some hot dogs on the way?
Well, they weren't looking for parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And last up, what is your favorite quote from the movie? Dustin.
This actually was really difficult for me to choose. I did choose a Joey line, but there's several like it, so I'm just going to use this one to represent the kind of lines he has, which is T-Ray says to him, "I don't like you." And his response is, "You don't even know me." And there's a lot of stuff like that in the movie. I think Trillian says something makes fun of his face, I'm going to break your face, not like anyone would notice.
Yes.
And I think his answer is where is this coming from? He's pulling away from the comedy. So it was hard to pick just one, but I'm going to go with it. You don't even know me.
That was also in my top pick for best quote. And second up was, I think we killed a speedboat.
Yeah, that's a great line. For me, the quote is actually at Finnegan's expense, where he's talking with with Mason, the most dislikable of the mercenaries, who gets in a pretty great insult here of Finnegan saying, "Like a fine wine, I'm aging gracefully, thank you." And Mason comes back to him and says, "You look more like a keg of beer to me." It's a good, so yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for our superlatives. JD, before we move into our ratings and final section here, what would you like to plug for our show?
Being the creature fanatic, that obviously this was one of the many creature-based films that was formative of my childhood, and now I make a living making creature art. You can find my stuff as painting dragon feathers across social media, and I do make convention appearances. At the time of this recording, I will be at SetsuCon in Altoona, PA at the end of January, and then I will be at KatsuCon in National Harbor in DC in February. As long as the Rona doesn't screw everything up. The octoli come through and get all the...
Yeah, cross fingers on that, but even if not the con, check her out online. She has a raft of great material.
I actually do have a block print I call Release the Quacken, which is a giant rubber duck with tentacles swallowing a ship. So, on brand for this movie.
The Murduck. All right. Well, let's move into our final section here. Let's get some ratings and recommendations. Dustin, on a scale of 0 to 5 stars with half-star increments, how do you rate this movie?
This movie's fun, y'all. This movie's fun as you have to buy into the tone that I think is very helpfully moved, like given to you by Kevin O'Connor's character. It's a 3.5 from me. It is reminiscent of greater action movies that didn't end up in the triple digits at the box office. You can see why there's people that don't love it and why it's got such low ratings. It doesn't mean it's not fun. It's definitely above average because of the campiness or the corniness of some of this stuff. But there's too many instances where they don't lean into that more. I didn't recast it, but think of more characters like a Steve Zahn, or imagine if there's all of the mercenaries are as fun as Joey. It could be that, but it's not. And hey, Stephen Sommers eventually gets to his incredible movies. But this one, for even with some of the nostalgia for JD, I still think this is just barely better than average, though it is fun. So 3.5 for me.
JD, how would you rate it?
Honestly, I was thinking give it a 3.5 as well, because, like I said, I had nostalgia goggles with thinking about this movie a lot. I remember introducing it to some friends in college and enjoying it a lot then, and then rewatching it now for this podcast, it's like, oh, these characters are flatter than what I remember, and just some little bit of plot holes. So, I think, we talked about a lot of areas that could be improved. It almost seems like it's one step away from being it's one step away from, hitting, the achievement that Predator did. So,
yeah, one more draft.
Yeah, if the script had gone through one more draft and maybe some of the characters rounded out a little bit more, it would rank higher. I honestly would also depend too, I know people, it is a somewhat gory movie that I would not necessarily recommend it to, so that might skeeve off a bunch of people, yeah, I'm gonna stay with 3.5 to 4 stars, depending on what kind of mood you're in.
So I'm right there with you guys on 3.5 stars. I think this is a movie that is a lot of fun. It is objectively not a great written movie. It has areas where you could totally cut the fat out of this movie in a lot of ways. This is one of these scripts that you could delete the first 20 pages on and it would almost work better in a way, where you just start out on the ship. JD's mentioned a couple of times, hey, what if this movie literally started out with they board the ship and they don't know anything? You cut out a lot of the sort of weird genre interactions that are happening and you get a lot of other things. But yeah, I think this is, for all of that, an incredibly fun movie with great effects and a lot of heart put into its monsters. So it is pretty great. Dustin, for next time, would you like to help me pick a movie?
Yeah. Are we going to do Titanic too? Or I guess this is, maybe it's somebody else, but absolutely ready to help. Yeah.
Yeah, or Poseidon Adventure. That would be another
Poseidon
option
Adventure?
But, yeah. Option number 1, Jerry Maguire, 1996. When a sports agent has a moral epiphany and is fired for expressing it, he decides to put his new philosophy to the test as an independent agent with the only athlete who stays with him and his former colleague. Option number 2, Bill Durham from 1988. A fan who has an affair with one minor league baseball player each season meets an up-and-coming pitcher and the experienced catcher assigned to him. Option number 3, Breaking Away from 1979. A working-class Indiana teen obsessed with the Italian cycling team vies for the affections of a college girl while searching for life goals with his friends. So, Dustin, what'll it be?
These are some, kind of counterculture sports movies here. Yeah, let's do number 3, Breaking Away. 79? Breaking Away.
All right, that will be it for next time. Once again, JD, thank you so much for coming on and for introducing us to this movie.
Thank you for having me.
And to all of you out there, thank you all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Those reviews and subscriptions do help others find the show. Give us a like on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at movie_retro, or email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. We invite you to support the show on our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. Any contribution is appreciated and will go toward making the show better for you, our listeners. As always, thank you for listening, be good to each other, and watch more movies. Dustin?
Well, ain't love grand? Y'all want to lie on the ground and make snow angels together?